I'm live and you're live. Uh, Ever notice if you watch Netflix how it does that percentage thing where it's like your movie's coming on and we know that psychologically you'll feel more at ease if we do a little counter thing to let you know what's happening. But the movie loads in the West anyways pretty fucking quickly. And it always does so with the same more or less like number conversions, right? Like if you're having trouble with the stream, it will do its fake loading thing to 25% to 5% and then just kind of stay there. And you're like, oh, what does 25% even mean if you're just not going to load the whole thing? Or when it typically loads the whole thing, it does like 25 and then like 42 and then I think it jumps straight to like 99, which you never get the 100 because then it just goes up. But it's always the same number. I wonder why that is. I mean, I know why that is. Do you? It's all programming. Same with the words that we use and the concepts that we associate with them, and then all the multiple associative concepts that we connect to different sounds and different meanings. Like associate to do with, associate, association, associate, ass, socia, if you are especially literate and think in terms of words, then there's no mistaking the social aspect. In Proto-Indo-European languages like Sanskrit, the A before a thing connotates the opposite of, and that's a negation. So ahimsa is non-harm. Himsa is harm. So associate, it's like to not associate or to not whatever associate means. But then associate on its own, that sounds like society. And a before something used to mean the opposite of whatever follows, but now we use uninhibited, uncivilized. Well, isn't that an A sound? Couldn't it be? That takes me to the topic of this talk, this conversation. Thank you for joining me. This is your first time. My name is Elliot. And it's a pleasure to be with you in this moment, in the manner with which we are. Although I'd much prefer if you were chilling in my living room with me. One day. Or like, some kind of forum where I get to see your pretty face. Just to speak about connotations really quickly, pretty. Did you automatically think girl? Because boys just, you don't call boys pretty. You call them handsome. Because when I said it, I meant a genderless inference. But I did so with the awareness that I used to associate pretty with a word you used for girls. So maybe just by pointing it out, becoming more aware, you can free yourself too. Positive and negative. Positive, it's a good thing. Negative is a bad thing. Don't have a negative attitude, have a positive attitude. But then positive also means, or is used to represent one force in electricity. Negative, it's counterforce. And there's no, and you can't even really use them, even in terms of speaking purely electromagnetically, where consciously or subconsciously, you're not associating them with the meanings that we attach them to, with meaning good and bad. It takes a lot of awareness to create independence in those terms. And why I mean a lot of it, what I mean by a lot of awareness, I mean many associations or realizations of positive and negative meaning different things, and so meaning a specific thing depending on the context. So a lot of awareness would be a lot of contextually defining presence of mind in the environment with which you are voicing, symbolizing, creating. Positive. Well, what's in positive as well is position. And what is in negative is negation. What is in position and negation is ion. And what's in each of those is also tau, or ta, or tau, or phi. And the way batteries work is, just in terms of how it's useful as an analogy here, is the charge, basically negative energy is pulled from the battery to get to the positive side of, through a circuit to the positive side of the battery. So when the battery runs out, it's basically out of negative energy. We live in a world where that runs off of negative energy. We live in a world where we create using the power of negation, which is why there's so much heat, radiation, so much energy wastage, dissipation. For instance, when power is generated at a power station, it travels there to the grid, to your point of usage, we'll say our home or your appliance. Now the grid is not a battery, so when power is not running through it, it is powerless. And when the power is generated from the station, and travels towards your appliance, then along the way, it travels along the grid, which is mostly comprised of cables or wiring. And just so you know, electricity doesn't travel in the wire, it travels around the wire. It pulls the electrical energy is attracted to it, and it swirls around the wire. It doesn't go into the wire. So when you wrap it with some kind of insulation, it what it's doing is not allowing the electromagnetic radiation of the environment to then also interact with the electricity that's traveling through the wire. And as such, it can be manipulated because as the electricity runs from the power station to your appliance, it is getting further and further from its source. And as it gets further and further from its source, it's not losing shit. It's doing what it wants to do, which is diffuse. It wants to interact with the environment. And along the way is air and the copper wire and whatever insulating material is being used for it. The insulating material is also pulling energy away from the copper wire, the copper wiring. So by the time it gets to your house, I think I just was reminded it's like something like, let's say 5,000 volts is generated from the station, about 500 volts makes it to your place, and that's just a straight shot. So tons and tons of wastage. Where does that wastage go? Into the environment. Yeah. And when the wastage is artificially created, it will be naturally reintegrated because systems, the world, the universe is a balance between disorder and order, or chaos and construction. But if we live in a world, for instance, a society, where the use of one form of energy greatly outweighs the use of its gender opposite, then there will be catastrophic or cataclysmic. I like catastrophic too. Uh, Events to rebalance that usage. And it will usually be in the form of where the imbalance is being expressed the worst, and it will usually be in the form to eliminate the source of the imbalance. So now I'm going to go to the how it is associates with the genders. For our intents and purposes, everything is polar, which means every one thing is an expression of itself at its most has expressions of itself at its most distinctly self-different. So if I'm a 100% good guy, then polarly, I am the most good and the least good, with no bad. until maybe the most good stays called the most good, and then the least good we call bad, and now there's good and bad. But everything is polar, and those polars are represented, for our intents and purposes, genderly, male, female, and you can use any word, north, south, east, west. Like, it's just a representation, but it's not just a representation of one thing. All symbols, there's no symbol exists in isolation. So, which is why gender has been attacked and made war upon so powerfully over the last few hundred years. I know you think it's been longer, but it hasn't. Male and female, man and woman. Its connotation is man and woman came first, and male and female were named apropos, male and female after the fact. When truly, man and woman, which I'm not 100% convinced has historically meant the male sex and the female sex. I think that that's actually also part of the word manipulation and the spell magic. That we've been subject to. But they're actually, like, man and woman are more in reference and in honor of the male female principles. And everything has everything is polar, everything is gender. So now when with my analogy, why I used good, being I'm a good man, is that as soon as you have a pole, you can then create more complexity, or more complexity can arise with awareness by define or by discovering that pole as an entity in and of itself and finding its gender. So the act of creation and the act of destruction or the acts of creation and negation, the mother principle, the mom, is traditionally associated with being creative. The female is the creative energy. The male, in the act of creation, doesn't have as powerfully connotative symbol the in the reproductive schema, right? Like, females are creative, men are destructive. Yeah, that'll never fly. First of all, because if that isn't the case, not independent of everything else. And also, we have so many illusions in terms of what we associate with killing, dying, destroying. They're all bad. Those are evil things. You don't destroy things. You don't kill things. And yet, all of us die. Construction, confusion. There's a lot of confusion in terms of the symbols for who and what we are and what we're capable of. So let's offer a viewpoint. All is void. All is. All is void. All is matter. And then let's delve into the gender of matter. And we'll say, we'll do this with every step. So void we'll call negation. And going back to my earlier terminology, we'll call matter position. And why? Well, in void is, we'll just say, is lacking in motivation, in location. It does not. And void is no movement. And no Cartesian like coordinate. It doesn't have a location. So the opposite of void is to have a position. So void, matter. Now let's go into matter. Well, matter in and of itself has gender as well. And here it might very well just be, I'm just talking out loud, thinking out loud, because I talk not in the loud as well. In matter, there is position, creation, maybe, and it's destruction, right? And then if we go into creation a little bit more, we have conception, which is like the idea of a thing, and potentiation, which is the potential of the idea of the thing. And you can very similarly use everything I use on one side on the other, because like in destruction, there's the destructing, taking the reversing of the structure and the maybe atrophical force. Anyways, this is it's more thought experiment because there's potential for creating firmer guidelines towards what I'm saying. Change tracks a little bit. We live in a time, I've lived in a time, where men suck and women have been enslaved and deserve power. So I've lived in an age, mine, of women empowerment and male disempowerment, which is neither here nor there. Like if one gender has more power than another in such an imbalanced way, then disempowering is empowering for the whole. But what if that's not the case? It's not. Don't worry, Murph. My dog hears anybody in the hallway. And he's like, "Yo, is that my guy?" 'Cause my cousin walks him along with me. He's like, "Yo, is that walk time?" Every time. So, could it be? Because I love that shit. No, buddy. It's okay. You're vigilant. I'm gonna put you down a little bit. Okay. Let's say in the reproductive act, the male is the or even in general, the creative or generative force is male, and the negative force is female. And then, but past that, right after that, the nurturative. Oh, fuck, I just set you down and I've got to plug you in. Pardon me. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that, and thank you. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Nurturative, or nurturing, and the male energy is protective. Further than that, the female energy is conservative. Or, yeah, or it's, we're going really back and forth like man and woman. But you see how like the roles kind of keep reversing. So with, just to recap, because I had that interruption, the feminine womb is the void. It's the stillness. It is. Then it's there's gestation, and then there's birth, but within birth there's a negation, a finishing, right? And welcome, thanks for joining me. After, so just as that was a short recap: void, creation. After creation, and then the male is the sperm, movement, catching, you know, just for fun. Then the female nurtures. The woman nurtures. The man protects. The woman creates restriction in conservation. The man adheres to that shit, right? Because we just fucking do everything. It's like that makes no sense. It's like you're right. And then if like then there's tons of these stages where and until the end where the act that or death is feminine in nature. It's a return to the void, and the male energy in line with that is regeneration. Because after regeneration, there's generation. So to be alive right now is to be suppressed on all fronts, because all of us are masculine and feminine, which is gender specific, not sex specific. All of us are masculine and feminine. And the feminine is suppressed in that the negation, like everything runs off the negative polar energy of electricity, and that is inherently the aspect that destroys, right? It's explosive, it's combustive, it creates destruction, which is necessary. But we are living in a world where we create using destructive forces. And then the male, we are, I can speak, we as, I can, me as a guy, but the male creative energy, we are positioned as the destroyers of all. And the positive pole of the energy, positive energy, is underdeveloped, ignored even. I think it's stowed away. I think that there is a grand illusion that is mostly to mask the truth of energy for the purposes of harvesting an aspect of that energy. And because life resists being harvested, truly, the most effective defense is invisibility, is in non-awareness. And the righteousness of negation is the period of time in which we're moving into. Because death is beautiful. There is no end. As much as there's no beginning, except for the ends and beginnings that we position. And then dissolve into. But negation is the worst fucking thing. Don't hurt this. Don't kill that. Reduce, reuse, recycle. And then in the same fucking hand, we don't do any of that shit. Right? I want to say imaginarily because I have never been to war. And I'm not going to say that like all war is fake, but I just know a lot of shit is thrown at me that's not real. But let's just say that that war conceptually is real. Don't kill, but let's go kill for nothing. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Yo, for Christmas, Mass, Christ Mass, Christ Massed. It took me longer to unpackage my nephew's toys than it did for them to get bored of them. Now, I'm not saying like my nephews had that little attention span. It took me that long, and I don't know about you, but like the older I get, the better my memory gets. And I remember getting to my toys pretty quickly. It was usually just like a flimsy piece of plastic and a piece of cardboard. I just like pulled the two apart and there was my toy. Like twist ties, and then like 4 layers of plastic. So don't tell me we are living in a time where, or we're living with a social principles of regeneration or positivity, and there's all this fucking waste because negation and position are in relationship. And if we look into the world, we see mostly a lack of negation. And it's all very confusing because planned obsolescence means it's planned. The idea is for the thing to become obsolete. What does that mean? It sounds like a combination of obfuscate, which is to make hard to see, and delete, when it's really neither. Or yeah, it's obfuscating, deleting, because planned obsolescence doesn't negate, it creates more waste. It creates more with which energy will be sapped, harvested, hidden. So in terms of the sexes, we are both man and woman, creative and destroyers. We are all Shiva. Or Shiva Kali. And how at the top levels of abuse, it's not men that are the suppressors. Because as a guy, when I see women at that tier of power, usurpation really, where that asshole guy that we blame for everything, the patriarchy, I see the woman being just as suppressive. Now, because we associate that asshole with these dominating features, and then his partner, his trophy wife, will call her as being a woman suppressed. Does she look fucking suppressed? I would never choose to be that asshole. He looks fucking suppressed. Like, that is a farce of what I am. The same with the woman. So if they're both farces, then it doesn't matter if I'm a man or a woman. That woman is dominating perception. Just as the man is. And we all have choice. So the moral of the story is we're moving into a time of negation and the respect for it. A removal of the fear of death and an installation of the fear of living. Being afraid to live and miss it. I don't want to live a long life. I'm afraid to live without meaning. The way vortexes work, energy, there's an explosive force and an implosive force. Energy can be expressed expulsively or impulsively. When a turbine only operates on two planes, which is man-made, because nothing made from divine source without conscious intervention is made just on those two planes, not on this plane. So it's what I'm suggesting is that it's on its axis, the wings of the turbine, they move like this. It creates an expulsive force where force is radiated um, externally. That uh, fundamentally uh, is destructive. It creates resistance outside of itself to almost like take its inside out until there's no inside anymore, which is why we have to sustain the combustive, explosive, radiating forces by constantly feeding it. And whatever force is being generated by the explosion, we are then using to explode other things. Right? The hydropowered power plant. The hydro plant is using explosive technology to then generate more waste in transmitting our power along expletive means, right? Where all the waste along the wires, along all the waste, all the waste, all the way, heat waste, like it's fundamental to the universe. So eventually, something's got to give, and what gives right now is uh, is is taking back. Impulsive is, and it can be spinning in the same way. I don't want to confuse the concept, but an impulsive turbine is shaped the same way it spins. So it operates on more than the two planes. In that, when you look at this, that's the two-dimensional plane, and it kind of no matter where I rotate it, it looks the same. Whereas an impulsive turbine looks the same, looks one way, it looks two-dimensional if you look at the other way, but as you spin it, you'll see that it changes. Everything is two-dimensional if you only look at it from head on. And depth perception is lacking in the world. And I'm not saying that as a judgment, I'm saying that as a fetter to our freedom and done on purpose. Everything that sucks is done on purpose because we don't like shit that sucks, and we solve that. And we're getting to the point where solving is coming from dissolving. And when you live in a world where there's no dissolution technology, that empowers the disempowered. Because they ain't gonna see shit coming. To close-ish, the impulsive force, it draws energy inwardly. So whereas an explosive force is pushing out, an impulsive force is drawing in. But there's no vacuum, yo. So everything is you gotta get the initial or whatever positive positional energy. It's gotta come from somewhere. So explosive energy is still like it's drawing something in. Because if you just take every end of the pole and then you make it another entity and it has a pole too. So explosive force has an impulsive and then explosive aspect within it. So it's taking the explosive force is pushing outward and it's taking everything in, but it's taking it where it's taking it up the ass, right? It's like a fan, right? It takes the air from behind it and it pushes outward. Whereas impulsively, it takes the energy, it takes energy from the outside, takes it in, and it's gotta go somewhere, unless it's in a state where, pardon me, unless it's in a state in an environment where it's receiving feedback, where it's like I'm drawing things in until I'm good, and then I'll stop, and then when I need more, I'll pull it in. But let's just assume the same entropying environment as the explosive paradigm. So it's drawing energy in, and then it's pushing it. It's moving it through its system, and then it's moving it into whatever system it's a part of. So it's affecting the environment. But then it wants to draw back in. So what it needs is a layer that does the opposite of its internal. So on the inside is this impulsive draw of vortexual energy, and then as it pushes out, if it needs to come, if it's like, yo, actually I want that, I still want energy in, there needs to be something in between the indrawing, the outdrawing, and then another indrawing. And that is the vortex wall. That's the tornado, the hurricane. It's the explosive force contained by the impulsive engine. Energy drawn in, energy added to the environment, requiring the same energy, because all it is. So energy is then, so the opposite energy, it doesn't take energy to create that vortex wall. That vortex wall is the partner of the energy that isn't, is the energy of what isn't yet. Because as it gets pushed out, it changes, and to return, it changes, return. And that system couldn't be everything. But it's so magical seeming because it's so the opposite of everything that we've been told. If we imagine an environment let's imagine an environment where explosive is generative. So energy drawing in, pushed out radially, is going to push out radially until it finds another force that will use it, basically. So really, well, that was easy. Explosive and impulsive, it's like saying head of the snake, tail of the snake. There is no difference except by degree. Which is why the propping of one sex or the other is only divisive. unless seen through the lens of motion, of progression, of spiraled natural movement. Because I'll prop my female leg forward to then stabilize so that I may prop my male leg forward, so that I may stabilize, so that I may prop my female leg forward. One and then the other has been made to be a bad thing. Equality means at the same time. Equality only exists in math, and math only exists in our minds. Adding, subtracting, multiplying, blah blah. That's not math. Math is the word that is the pathology that we use to describe the act. And largely, mathematics is the science of confusing reality. Because real mathematics, you don't call mathematics, you call figuring shit out. And theoretical mathematics is what you call the theater of the mind. Because you can't, when you pride yourself, when we pride ourselves on what we've figured out about what we think we've figured out, but really we don't know. That's what we are just positioning and not negating. Right? I saw like 5 seconds, because I don't like to waste my time, the newest fangled theory of everything that so-called physics has figured out. And it takes up like, I don't know, like 3 blackboards or whatever like that. Nothing in nature is complicated. Simple is not the opposite of complex. Simple is the opposite of complicated. The opposite of complex isn't simple. But like, isn't that the first word you want to use? If I were to describe the opposite of complex, I would call it elementary. But then I could break elementary down into its polar elements of complexity and initiation. Okay. Okay, I'll close with this. Closing for me takes a long time. Just like opening does. we could all benefit greatly from realizing the creative power of destroying. Of the divine aspect of returning a thing to the void, of realizing the lifetime of a thing and assisting it in its progression towards its next stage of development. And women are the creators. Men are the creators. Men are the destroyers. Women are the destroyers. Men and women have been horribly, so as to be detrimentally suppressed. Because a people have been suppressed. I can't unequivocally say that all people have. I know that a people have. Whoever my people are. And I know you're there. And the sooner that we dissolve any excuse for us to not come together, will be the more powerful of our collective removal of barriers to waste. Look at the grammar of that sentence. Barrier to waste. As a barrier from wasting, or a barrier to do the act of wasting. It is not a coincidence that the dominant language is so confusing. It's made to be that way. And there's a solution. It just comes after the dissolution. Right? Well, that makes sense, because whatever solution we're in right now is cloudy as shit. I prefer a mist. But my name kind of is Mr. E. Oh, awful, the best. Oh, thanks for joining me again. Everything will be to be continued. But this video talk is the least of what we're all doing. And is just a stage of transition between being physically among our people again. So thank you for joining me. And I'll see you soon. And I love you. Of course. Namaste. I love you so much. Mm-hmm.